All right, so today, since there's no school for students, I am going to be going over the study guide for the test tomorrow. So I'm going to go through each of the questions, and then obviously, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me via email, and I will do my best to answer those for you before the test tomorrow. So let's start with number one. Okay, so a farmer has a square fenced-in area for animals on her property. She decided to change the shape of the fenced-in area, but wants to use the same amount of fencing material. The equation x plus 8, x minus 8 equals 336 represents the relationship between the new side lengths in feet of the fenced-in area and its area. And its actual area. We know that, of course, that area for a square, area for a rectangle, is always length times width. So if 336 represents the area of the new fenced-in area, what do the expressions x plus 8 and x minus 8 represent? So they're telling us that 336 represents the area, the total area. So 336 represents the total area. Then that means the other two things are going to represent the length and the width. So in this case, x plus 8 will represent the length, and x minus 8 will represent the width. So if 336 represents the area of the new fenced-in area, what do the expressions x plus 8, x minus 8 represent? So to answer that question, x minus 8 represents the length, and x plus 8 represents the width. That is what we're looking for in Part A. Part B. Find x, the original side length in feet of the square fenced-in area. Use the method of your choice. So in other words, we are going to solve this equation up here. X plus 8 times x minus 8 equals 336. So the problem with this is we can't use the zero product property because it's not set equal to 0. It's set equal to 336. Okay. We could decide to use the quadratic formula if we wanted to multiply this out. We could multiply this out and complete the square. But because it says use the method of your choice, I'm actually going to do this by graphing. So I'm going to use Desmos to help me figure out the answer. Okay. So I'm going to open up a tab. And I'm going to go to Desmos. And my equation is x plus 8, x minus 8 equals 336. Okay. Now I don't see anything right away, so I'm going to have to zoom out. So notice I get x equals negative 20 and x equals positive 20. Now, considering we're talking about the side length of a square, which one do we think is the actual answer, the negative answer or the positive answer? Obviously, the positive answer. So according to Desmos, the answer would be x equals 20. Okay, so that is the side length. Now, even though there is a solution of negative 20, we are disregarding that because in this case, x represents the length of a square or the side length of a square. So we are allowed to do that in this particular case only because the x value represented the side length of a square. But that's all they were going for in number one, was to put this equation into Desmos and use that to find x. Okay, so that is it for number one. Let's look at number two now. Okay, solve each equation without graphing. Show your reasoning. So let's look at A. So we have 2x minus 7 times x plus 8 equals 0. Okay, in this particular case, we can use the zero product property because it is set equal to 0. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set each factor equal to 0, and I'm going to solve for x. And as I do that, I realize I made a mistake here. That should be 0. And that should be 0. So on the left-hand side, I'm going to start by adding 7 to both sides. So if I add 7 to both sides, I'm going to get 2x equals 0 plus 7. Okay. And then I'm going to finish it off by dividing both sides by 2. So 7 divided by 2 is going to be what x is equal to. So that's going to be 3.5. 7 divided by 2 is 3.5. So x equals 3.5 is one of the solutions for A. The other solution, x plus 8 equals 0. I will solve that by subtracting 8 from both sides. So I'm going to get x equals 0 minus 8, which is negative 8. So that is it for A. I have x equals 3.5 and x equals negative 8. Okay. Let's look at B. We have x squared minus 10x minus 19 equals 5. Okay, notice it's not set equal to 0 yet, so I need to rewrite it so that it is set equal to 0. So I have to subtract 5 from both sides. So that gives me 0. So I'm going to get x squared minus 10x, negative 19 minus 5 is going to be minus 24. So x squared minus 10x minus 24 equals 0. So you have a choice in how to solve this. Okay, it doesn't specify which method to use. We could factor. We could also use the quadratic formula. I am personally going to factor. Okay, so we want two numbers that add up to negative 10 and multiply to negative 24. Okay, so because our product is negative, we know we need a positive and a negative. And because the sum is also negative, then we know that the quote unquote bigger number has to be negative. So the two numbers that work in this case is negative 12 and 2. If you don't believe me, check. Negative 12 plus 2 is negative 10, and negative 12 times 2 is negative 24. So my factors are going to be x minus 12 and x plus 2. And now I could use the zero product property just like I did over here. So x minus 12 equals 0, x plus 2 equals 0. On the left-hand side, if I add 12 to both sides, I'm going to end up with x equals 0 plus 12. And on the right-hand side, I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides, so I'm going to get x equals negative 2. So my two solutions are x equals 12 and x equals negative 2. All right. Part C, x squared plus 12x plus 32 equals 0. Again, I have a choice. This is already set equal to 0, so I could factor. I could use the quadratic formula. Excuse me. I could do completing the square. I'm going to choose to factor. Okay, since these numbers are positive, I just need two numbers that add up to 12 and multiply to 32. So two numbers that when I add them, I get 12. And when I multiply them, I get 32. Of course, that's going to be 8 and 4. 8 plus 4 is 12. And 8 times 4 is 32. So That's going to give me 8x plus 8 and x plus 4 as my factors. Okay. And I can now go ahead and set both of those equal to 0. And when I do that, I'll get, let's see, I'll subtract 8 from both sides. So I'll get x equals 0 minus 8. And then on the other one, I'll get x equals negative 4. So those are my two solutions, x equals negative 8 and x equals negative 4. And I believe, yes, that is it for number 2. Okay, moving on to number 3. Solve the following quadratic equation by completing the square. So x squared minus 10x plus 16 equals 0. Okay, so if you forgot the steps for completing the square, that is in lesson 12. That is in lesson 12. So these are the lesson notes from lesson 12. Okay, so our first step is to move the constant term to the right-hand side of the equal sign. So I'm going to subtract 16 from both sides. So that will give me x squared minus 10x equals 0 minus 16. Step 2, divide the coefficient of the x term by 2 and then square it. So the coefficient of the x term in this case is negative 10. So divide that coefficient by 2. So negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5, and then square it. Negative 5 squared is 25. Okay. Step 3, add that number to both sides of the equal sign. So add 25. So x squared minus 10x plus 25 equals, so that will be the left-hand side. The right-hand side is going to be negative 16 plus 25, which is 9. Okay, so that was step 3. Step 4, convert the left-hand side of the equal sign to factored form. So I need to convert this to factored form. So that will give me, let's say, two numbers that add up to negative 10 and multiply to 25. Okay, my product is positive, which means that the numbers either need to both be positive or both be negative. In this case, because the sum is negative, then the numbers both need to be negative. So my factors are just going to, the numbers are negative 5 and negative 5. Negative 5 plus negative 5 is negative 10. Okay, and negative 5 times negative 5 is positive 25. So my two factors are x minus 5 twice, which looks like this. And remember, we talked about this, that whenever you have the same thing multiplied by itself twice, that means squared. So this is really x minus 5 squared equals 9. And I'm going to have to move up here since I'm out of room. So I have x minus 5 squared equals 9. So I converted the left-hand side to factored form. Step 5, solve the resulting equation by square rooting. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Okay, remember that the square root and the squared cancel each other out, so that gives me x minus 5. On the right-hand side, I have the square root of 9, which is going to be positive and negative 3. And then I will finish this off by adding 5 to both sides. So 3 plus 5 is 8, My second solution is going to be negative 3 plus 5, which is 2. So my answer is x equal, but yeah, my solutions are x equals 8 and x equals 2. Okay. Step number 4. Solve the following equation by using the quadratic formula. If you forgot the quadratic formula is in lesson 16. Okay, in lesson 16, that's the one in the picture in green there. That is the formula. Remember, A is the coefficient of the x squared term, B is the coefficient of the x term, and C is the constant term. So in this particular one, if I identify A, B, and C, A in this case is going to be 6. B is going to be 11. That's the coefficient of the x term. And C is going to be negative 35. Okay? And then I'm just going to use this formula. So x equals negative b plus and minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. So if I do that over here, I'm going to end up with x equals negative b plus and minus square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c divided by 2 times a. All right. And for this, you're probably going to need a calculator. I would expect you to use a calculator, whether it's the one on your Chromebook or Desmos, whichever one works for you. So for this one, we have, let's see, negative 11 plus and minus. So 11 squared is 11 times 11. That's going to be 121. And then over here, we have negative 4 times 6 times negative 35. So that's, again, negative 4 times 6 times negative 35. And that's going to be a positive 840. Okay, so negative 4 times 6 times negative 35 is a positive 840, which changes that to a plus, divided by 2 times 6. Okay, let's keep going. Negative 11 plus and minus square root 840 plus 100, or 121 plus 840 is 961 over 12. Okay. And again, I don't expect you to know the square root of 961, but in this case, the square root of 961, if you use a calculator, square root of 961 is 31. So this becomes negative 11 plus and minus 31 divided by 12. Okay. So I am going to do this twice. So negative 11 plus 31 is 20, and 20 divided by 12 is going to be 1.6 repeating. Okay. Negative 11 minus 31 is negative 42, and then I'm going to divide that by 12. And that's going to be negative 3.5. So my solutions are 1.6 and negative 3.5 for number 4.